acquisition season is absolutely not ending because Sony have just acquired Bungie, and also Deviation Games, which is something that I think has generally been overlooked in the media. And that's important because of what Deviation Games actually are and how they've been working on a secret project for years now. That's probably major.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the whole point being they've got Bungie who make Destiny 2 and have some of the, obviously ex-Halo, of course. Jokes aside about it being Microsoft who now own Crash and Spyro and Sony who now own ex-Halo devs. Jokes about that aside. They have ex-Halo devs of Destiny 2. It's one of the best feeling shooters on the market in the era of, is Call of Duty going to be cross-platform forever?
Definitely got 3 years, but we don't know how much more.
Yeah, we don't know how much more, which means they've got 3 years to get a Call of Duty competitor. But they've had Deviation Games, who are the ex-Treyarch devs. They've had them set up for quite a while, and now they have Bungie to add to that. And you're thinking, the Mad Lads could maybe do it. They maybe could.
You have to think, what did NetEase invest all that money in Bungie for?
Yep, that's 100 million we haven't seen yet.
Exactly. So this is a large acquisition, but it's not humongous.
It's only
now that everything's big. It's a mere $3.6 billion. I mean, chump change. Okay, it'll be chump change to Microsoft. Probably a little bit more to Sony, in fairness.
Yes, for sure.
But once this closes, Bungie is going to become an independent subsidiary of Sony Interactive Entertainment, which itself is actually fairly good. And some of the concerns that people will have had about ActiBlizz's future, I don't really think they seem to be as there, based on the initial communications anyway.
Yeah, based on, I think, everything they've said, everyone's like, oh, this changes nothing except Sony now can, peek their head into Bungie and say, how did you get that to do that? Can we do that, please?
Yeah.
I think at least that's what I think most people are reading into it.
Yeah, now they do have a new board of directors, which basically is the current CEO and chairman and the rest of the studio's management team. Now, what's interesting is some of the communication here. So, Microsoft, there was worries. Microsoft tried to head off those worries, but still in a way where we're all thinking, okay, in a few years, what are you actually going to do? Could Sony be doing the same? Well, here's what they said. Basically, they have said that Bungie is going to remain a multi-platform studio. Now, that's a bit different to what Microsoft said.
Yeah.
Microsoft, they didn't say that in a studio level. It's, Call of Duty's future or whatever.
Yeah.
But this does sort of show, okay, the things Bungie make will be multi-plat. So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about the actual terms of acquisition for a second and what Bungie's history has been, obviously they were obviously started up under Microsoft. Then they, not sure if they started up, but they were under Microsoft for Halo. That's where they exploded. And then obviously they moved to Activision and it had enough and split to be independent. And I believe it was, I can't remember who it was, but it was someone at Bungie has said before that they're never being acquired again.
Yeah.
And obviously you look and go, well, okay, well, Sony just acquired them, so what's that about? But I imagine, at the negotiation table, they went, no, we're only going to do this if we get complete independence. Those are the terms of the deal, non-negotiable. Because I could imagine, honestly, given their history, I could imagine Microsoft might have reached out to them before and went, yo, you interested? They're like, no.
Yeah.
No, we know you're going to control us, and that's that's fine if that's on the table, but that's not on the table for us. So we want independence, or we're not playing. I think that must have been how it went down.
Yeah, and I think Sony are clearly aware, like for some phrasing here, to self-publish and reach players wherever they choose to play. Yep. Like that's pretty clear. Then there's Jim Ryan's write-up. First, I want to be very clear to the community that Bungie will remain an independent and multi-platform studio and publisher. So he's being very clear. Yeah. Again, Bungie's successful track record in multi-format publishing and live game services will assist us in realizing our ambitions to take PlayStation beyond the console and increase our potential audience. Now, even that's interesting because that's starting to sound like the sorts of things that Microsoft end up saying.
Yep. I think if nothing else, that tells us that their success on PC has probably completely exploded their expectations. I'm imagining they're seeing a massive amount of what they thought was a relatively capped market. Because they probably have all these ideas in their head of like, oh no, well, everyone who loves God of War will clearly have a PlayStation. But they haven't thought of people who don't love God of War enough to not buy a PS4 for it or PS5 for it, and instead to just, buy it when it's available to them. So I think they're actually now going, oh, hang on a second. And they likely discovered this around the time of Horizon Zero Dawn launching explosively. Obviously, God of War since did better. But they probably went, we actually are missing a trick by doing this. How can we keep the PlayStation brand, but also move here? And I think that's the goal.
Yeah, and ultimately, if they don't treat PC well, then they yield ground where Microsoft has an advantage fully to Microsoft.
Yeah.
Whereas if Microsoft's plan goes fantastically, what's the situation? Well, everyone with a PC is going to have a PS5. So there is a way where they can actually slot into this in quite a good way.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it depends what their strategy is, because like right now, that's how it's going to be. You and me will have a PS5, we'll have a PC. If they get more and more and more on PC, is that basically them, trying to secure some more share? And is it basically then a situation where they could be able to compete with Microsoft decently on the sales of first-party titles on PC, and then they also have a console base that, generally speaking, is larger than Microsoft's console base?
Yep, well, actions speak louder than words. And I think the most important thing we could possibly learn from their PC efforts so far is, obviously Horizon Zero Dawn didn't start off that well. It had some issues. But look at God of War. God of War released on PC, and I've never seen praise for a PC port like that in my life since, was it maybe the Monster Hunter World port was really good, I think. Everyone's just like, this port is incredible. And then they went out of their way to talk about, oh yeah, so we know PC players love FOV. We didn't have functionality in the renderer for FOV. We went out of our way, Santa Monica studio staff, implying they took time out of working on Ragnarok, which has already been delayed, to get this working by reworking some of the game. And you're like, okay, so obviously there's a kind of implied like premium nature to Xbox on PC, because it's just going to be the good Xbox games on PC. But this is like, oh no, we're the premium brand. When you buy our games, you're going to have a good experience. And we don't mean good experience functional. We mean good experience. We're going to go out of our way to make things that you specifically want, PC Gamer, which is, honestly, that's the way to go.
Even just seeing PC Gamer, their article about it running on a Ryzen APU.
Oh yeah, the APU,
and you just think like, what the hell? That's incredible.
Yeah.
So Sony might not be done though, as we should note.
Oh, they're definitely not.
We should absolutely expect more. We are by no means done. With PlayStation, we have a long way to go. I'll personally be spending a lot of time with Pete and the team at Bungie, blah, 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 blah. But elsewhere in the organization, we have many more moves to make.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing if you think about like this acquisition. Obviously, there's no way that this was a reaction to Xbox's purchase, because that's not how these things go. Especially with Bungie not wanting to be acquired, you're going to have to negotiate for a while. So this is just them continuing. And if you track like the data points of who they've purchased, you've got Housemarque, you've got Insomniac back in the day, you've got Naughty Dog forever ago, you've got Nixies, the porting studio, you've got Bluepoint, the porting studio, who are now on an original project, and you've got now Bungie. You're like, okay, well these are the best. These are basically the best developers in the world, and they're buying them. So instead of doing we're going to buy a huge amount of IP and be able to leverage all that IP, and as well as the development talent, they clearly don't care about IP in the slightest. They know that they have the ability to create IP within the PlayStation brand, so they're just going to grab the best creators and then make IP, as opposed to the best IP and then work on kind of the creation stuff, if you follow. So I imagine they're just going to do the same thing of, I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but who are the best developers in the world that are currently independent? Yoink. Well, have you?
Yeah, I think it's just keeping in mind that so much of this is just going to purely be talent acquisitions. They just want that. There's only so many developers. How many of them are, in your stable?
Yep.
And that's for what Bungie have said on this. Basically, and Sony says they found somebody who unconditionally supports us in all we are, and how Sony wants to help them accelerate their vision. All the usual. Today, Bungie begins our journey to become a global multimedia entertainment company. All right, Destiny, the TV show then. And that's how a lot of these big companies position themselves. I think Bungie, to be honest, I think they're looking at Riot and thinking, oh yeah, look how strong and interconnected their IP is. Yeah. Look how deeply invested their users are. Oh, they're creating multimedia culture. And I think they get little whiffs of that with the people who get super into Destiny beyond just the gunplay. And I think they've realized that that's something that's potentially really powerful. And then, of course, all the usual, we will independently do things, we're in charge of our destiny, all of that.
Yep.
Now, to kick over to some analysis then. Well, according to Tom Warren, if you're wondering how big Destiny 2 is for Sony, 860,000 players played D2 yesterday at a slow point in a season about to end later this month. 275k Xbox, 355k PlayStation, 224k Steam, and, of course, let us not forget, all 5,390 Stadia users. Do you know what? Maybe that's more than you would expect with Stadia.
Almost certainly.
So there you go.
I saw a game release on Stadia on Twitter the other day, and it was like a mind blow. I was like, holy, Stadia, it exists? That wasn't a fever dream we all had collectively? Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course, acquisition season has been wild. We've had, let's see, Zynga, we've had Activision Blizzard, we've had Bungie, it's a total of 85 billion. That's not every deal. Of course, there's also Embracer Group, who just generally go about gobbling people up.
Yep.
Now, this obviously is something that is beginning to raise eyebrows, right?
Yeah.
People are thinking, okay, this is a lot of consolidation. Well, on that, we actually just learned that the US FTC is going to be doing its own sort of report into the Activision Blizzard deal. And they actually recently sued to block NVIDIA's $40 billion acquisition of ARM. It's kind of funny. You think about all of what the ARM technology does in the world, and you think, wow, they're worth less than Activision Blizzard, who have Call of Duty and World of Warcraft. Wild.
IP big.
IP big, yeah. IP big, big indeed. And I suppose really now that we're in the stage where, being real, they have their differences, but both consoles are bloody fantastic.
Yeah.
Like, especially for the money. There's a lot of power in those boxes. I say that obviously as a, a bit of a PCMR sort of person back in the day. But no, these consoles are fantastic. And I think that means that it's coming into, it's content war.
Yep.
That's what it is. And that's why exclusivity is something people are worried about. Now, very obviously, all this talk of multi-plat, studio, and publisher, that they are free to self-publish, reach whatever players they choose. It does suggest a high degree of autonomy, and if you think about that, Bungie are probably thinking, good, we'll reach as many people as we can. We'll make as much money as we can. Which feels like a bit of a different strategy. It's interesting that Sony would be happy to have a business unit owned by them publish on Xbox. But ultimately, money's money.
It's also not unprecedented.
Oh,
because MLB The Show does extremely well on Xbox quite regularly, despite being a, I believe that's San Diego Studios. I believe Sony San Diego do that. I might be wrong, but that does extremely well for them, and that is like, it's a kind of thing where that's likely not going to have a huge impact on people buying, I'm going to buy a PlayStation for MLB The Show. That's likely a value add for people to have that there, so you might as well just get severe amounts of revenue out of it. Or maybe it's honestly that the people who make that game say, no, we want this to be an Xbox, so they're like, no skin off our back. Hard to know, but they're definitely very open about that.
Yeah, now, of course, they own the company, so they could do whatever they want in the future.
Of course, yeah.
Now, that means that it's kind of like these companies have got guns to each other's heads.
Yeah.
Phil Spencer can pull the Call of Duty gun, they can pull the Destiny gun. Balance, I think the Call of Duty gun is bigger. So it's definitely a harder position there if a sort of locking down exclusives war happens with all of these acquired companies.
Yeah.
But then again, a lot of people would say that PlayStation just fundamentally has the better system sellers. So that's always going to be a strength that they have. But I wonder, it could point towards the next console war being, honestly, a bit bloody. So with all of this going on, a lot of people are beginning to just be worried about, like, hey, I like shooters. I would like a PS5, but what if Call of Duty isn't there? We even have this retailer actually warning people. Translation here is, notice to gamers, Microsoft has bought Activision. Choose your machine carefully. That's a bit spooky for someone, just walking into the shop. Yep. So there's going to be some worry there. And this is where we would call out Deviation Games. All right? So Deviation Games are actually pretty damn important. They are working on AAA original IP, and Sony announced that they announced this partnership last year. Now, Deviation are led by a bunch of ex-Treyarch staff. like Jason Blundell, as an example. So basically, Sony has a Call of Duty relationship of their own.
That they do.
Which is certainly something I think we maybe have to wonder, given all of this. Would they want Deviation to work in a COD competitor or something? Who knows? Deviation, or maybe the one group of the experience who could.
Yeah, so that's the fun thing where in terms of generally brand recognition and stuff, Call of Duty is completely unassailable. But recently Activision have been taking steps to make it quite assailable, because obviously Warzone has a bunch of cheating problems all the time, and you're never going to beat the name Call of Duty on brand recognition in the short term. But over the next 3 years, if they aren't executed on perfectly, and Sony start to plant the seeds of their own competitor, which I think would be easier if they had access to EA, because obviously, if you want a shooter for the modern era, Apex Legends, defied all sort of expectations. Not that anyone had expectations, because it just exploded it just released and exploded one night. But that's the idea of, Apex is able to compete with Warzone on console, which must be terrifying. But there's no competitor for the yearly, or I guess hopefully not yearly anymore, box sales. So then you've got Bungie, who make Destiny 2, which is one of the best feeling shooters in the world, as I said earlier. You've got a bunch of ex-Treyarch staff. Obviously, I think Black Ops, Colin was saying, I think Black Ops wins most sales overall.
Yes.
So that's obviously what the ex-Treyarch staff are working on most of the time. You've got them. You've got Bungie. You've got now the best shooter developers in the world. Obviously, the staff in Infinity Ward are good and stuff like that. But now you've got the best shooter people in the world.
A lot of Infinity Ward that people used to venerate is, of course, now Respawn.
Yeah.
Funny enough, are doing excellent work.
Yep. So now, that's an interesting thought in itself. If you think about, this is why when we're talking about like experienced devs and talent, this stuff's really important, because, the people from Infinity Ward went to Respawn and made the best shooters that were way better than what they'd made before. So if you track the people and the experience and the talent, that's where the best games are going to come from. That's why Naughty Dog, even though they make some hiccups here and there in terms of game direction, it's like unassailably good quality games.
Yeah.
So you look at Bungie and you're like, okay, well, you've got Bungie who are doing exceptional work with Destiny. You've got Deviation. Yeah, all of the pieces to make a Call of Duty competitor are there. Like, as a physical game that's really good to actually shoot in and play. But then you think, well, PlayStation have been doing nothing but creating IP.
Yeah.
So they, among everyone else, obviously Microsoft are really positioned to leverage existing IP because they have massive developers, but Sony are the ones who want to make new IP. And that's even, I think earlier we were talking about, like, Sony are an entertainment company, Microsoft's a technology company, and those two differences will come in really, really heavy here. Because, obviously, well, I guess The Rock's working on a Call of Duty movie, so maybe that's a bit of a moot point, but we'll see about that. But I think they can do it. I hope they can do it, because I think people deserve something better than yearly Call of Duty releases.
Yeah, and especially with the iffy quality of the last two.
Yeah.
Which is a shame. Whenever that Modern Warfare came out, I know that it's had its own dramas, sort of regarding it as a competitive game and as a live service. But I think for a lot of people, that was like, oh, this franchise feels a bit more fresh. Mm-hmm. I then say, then the last 2/3 or last third of the campaign happened, bar that one cool mission that's like a little bit more freeform. And you're like, oh, right, okay, we're back to the norm. But they had this like really good chance to properly rejuvenate the series, and the 2 follow-up games just didn't do the job.
Yep, absolutely.
So, perhaps that weakness continues. We've even seen rumors of a Warzone 2.
Yeah.
Something's in the works. So it's all interesting as these big companies battle it out. I think in the near term, though, for players of Destiny, I mean, doesn't seem like there's really much to be concerned about.
Nope.
I very much doubt it will be pulled from Xbox. I mean, number one, it is pretty large in Xbox, right? It's larger than Steam on Xbox. So I don't think they'll pull Destiny or really do anything like that. They've said they're not going to. Yeah. The only chance that could happen would be with a Destiny 3. I think that's something that will be a long way away. And whenever that does happen, that's when people will already be re-examining their options for buying whatever the next generation of consoles is after this one. So short term, I think there's really nothing to be concerned about. I think for the Call of Duty players, they probably do have concerns that lie within the span of this console generation.
Yep, I think that's the key thing. I think there is no one shooter to rule them all at this very moment, and I think everyone in the industry knows that's where the money is.
Yeah,
they know that's can we be the next, can we get the Warzone, Apex, and Fortnite audience in the same game? If we can do that, we will just rule the industry. We'll have more revenue than, using the old phrase, more money than God. And I think that's what they're going for. But also, I think for people who don't care about shooters, there is the other angle where this proves Sony's plan and their strategy is not to compete with Microsoft in IP, or existing IP, or not to compete in them on how many games you get for your value. We'll see how Spartacus turns out whenever they reveal that. Which should be soon, I think.
Should be.
But I think their plan is just, we don't care about how many developers overall we have. We're going to make sure we have all of the best developers in the world working for us. And then we'll just be able to make games that no one can compete with. And I think, for many of its flaws, I think Ghost of Tsushima is one of those examples where that game is just I could see no other studio releasing that.
Yeah.
I in the face of what Sony could do with what they have going forward, I am feeling a lot weaker on Xbox's future lineup. Mostly because I haven't seen any of it yet. And who knows what a Playground Fable is going to look like. Maybe good, but I think Sony definitely have a horse in this race, whereas I wouldn't have said that 2 weeks ago without thinking about all this stuff.
Yeah, they're both strong. They're strong in different ways, and I think that's just
good for us.
It's weird. It's going to be good for us, but there might be a few pain points in the future.
Yeah, this consolidation shit's terrifying.
Yes,
for sure.
Basically, there you go. That's our thoughts on the situation right now. What an interesting time to be following this industry. It's truly getting wild, and
we actually have some interesting breaking news.
Breaking news time.
Unless this is a lie, I'm just gonna have to check real quick. Oh, never mind. I got trolled.
Oh, you got trolled.
Yep.
Oh, wow. On that note of Matt being trolled, that's it for the video.
Mm-hmm.
This is an interesting time. No doubt there will be more acquisitions from these companies. I think especially Sony, who maybe, there's a few more studios in their horizon, at least based on what they've said. And hey, maybe Microsoft too, because they do seem to have limitless money. And we'll get around to doing that Embracer video someday, because they truly are gobbling everything. So, that's it. I hope you found this interesting. Let me know, though, what are your thoughts on this? And I suppose with that, I'll see you next time.